comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far it travels. The retirement party was supposed to be my celebration. 37 years as a bookkeeper at Henderson and Associates. The country club sparkled with white linens, fresh flowers, and a cake scripted with my name. But the room went silent when my daughter-in-law raised her voice across the crowd. "Why are you so bitter, Lorna? You've always envied my parents' lifestyle." Her words cut through the music like a sharp blade, the crystal chandeliers catching the flash of her designer dress. I stood frozen as my own son, Damon, gave a small nod. "She's right, Mom. You're not part of our world anymore. Maybe stop trying to insert yourself into our lives." Heat rose to my cheeks, the same sting I hadn't felt since being scolded in grade school. Fallon kept going, her tone growing sharper. "It's sad, really. Your tiny apartment, that old car, and yet you keep giving us advice about money?" Neighbors, former colleagues, even the servers stared, pity in their eyes. Something inside me shifted, not with anger, but with final clarity. I took a calm breath and smiled, a real smile this time. "Fallon," I said evenly, "since you brought up money, let's talk about it." Her dramatic eye roll froze when I added, "Tell your parents it's time to resume payments on the $2 million loan I gave them." The color drained from her face. Damon's confident expression collapsed as I pulled up my banking app. "Would anyone like to see the paperwork?" I asked the stunned room. The screen glowed with the exact balance. $2,437,612.18. Principal plus interest. Damon leaned closer, speechless. Fallon gripped a chair for support. "Yes," I said quietly. "I still drive a 15-year-old Honda. And yes, I live simply, but don't confuse that with weakness." The room stayed silent, soft jazz, floating through the speakers like nothing had happened. "I do live in a small apartment," I said evenly, "but you know what they say about assumptions, dear." My voice grew steadier with every word. 3 years ago, your parents came to me in a panic. Their business was collapsing. Bankruptcy was weeks away. They needed capital fast, and they'd heard I might be able to help. Fallon shook her head hard. "No, number. My parents are wealthy. They paid for our wedding. They bought us the house. With my money," I replied, calm as ever. "Every dollar they've spent in the last 3 years came from that loan." Damon dropped into a chair, color draining from his face. "But you always said you were just getting by on your pension." "I said I lived simply," I corrected. "I never said I was poor." Fallon's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit. "You're making this up. You're jealous." "Shall I call them right now?" I asked, holding up my phone. I'm sure they'd be happy to confirm the details. "No." Fallon's voice cracked, then softened when she realized how loud she'd been. "Please, don't." "Why not, sweetheart? If I'm lying, they can clear it up in seconds." Her polished facade crumbled. For a moment she looked like a frightened child, not the woman who had been tearing me down minutes earlier. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." But I was done pleasing people who had never shown me the same courtesy. I looked around the room, at colleagues, neighbors, and the caterers now watching with new respect, then met my son's stunned eyes. "Enjoy the rest of the party," I said, slipping my phone back into my purse. "I think I'll head home." Fallon's desperate call followed me toward the door, but I didn't turn back. Each step felt lighter than the last. Outside, the valet brought my 15-year-old Honda around. I slid behind the wheel and smiled. Tomorrow was going to be an interesting day. That night, sleep never came. Instead, I sat in my modest living room with a cup of tea, surrounded by photo albums and old financial records I hadn't touched in years. The quiet felt different. Peaceful, not lonely. One photo caught my eye. Me at 28, holding newborn Damon, exhaustion and pride mingling on my face. Robert had died just 2 months earlier in a construction accident, leaving me with a mortgage, a baby, and exactly $347 in the bank. I remembered the fear and the resolve. Friends urged me to sell the house and move in with my mother, but I couldn't. This was Damon's home, the one his father had painted and built shelves for, dreaming of the stories we'd read together. So I stayed. I found a job at Henderson and Associates, a tiny accounting firm willing to take a chance on a young widow, willing to work late for modest pay. I started at the front desk, but I watched, learned, and mastered the numbers that others overlooked. Within 2 years, I managed the books for major clients. Within 5, I was quietly running the firm's finances while the owner played golf. I lived frugally, yes, but I was also building something no one else could see. Evenings and weekends, I offered quiet consulting to small business owners who needed real guidance. I charged reasonable fees and delivered results that spread by word of mouth. What began as survival became a legacy and the foundation of the fortune no one imagined I had. My quiet reputation grew. By the time Damon reached middle school, I was managing investment portfolios for a dozen local businesses. I quietly incorporated my own consulting firm and funneled profits into carefully chosen stocks and real estate. Outwardly, I lived modestly. Used cars, discount stores, coupon clipping, letting everyone believe I was a bookkeeper just getting by. In truth, I was building a hidden empire. I'd seen how people change when they know someone has money. Family members start asking for loans, children expect luxuries, and friends begin to measure friendship by what they can gain. I didn't want that for Damon. I wanted him to grow strong, to work hard, to value what he earned. So I kept my wealth invisible. Tuition appeared as if by magic each semester. College funds materialized when needed. Damon never lacked for anything essential, but he believed every opportunity came from my sacrifice, not from a fortune growing quietly behind the scenes. Looking back, I realize I overcorrected. Damon thought I was barely scraping by. He never understood the security I had built for both of us. When he graduated with a business degree, I quietly opened doors for him. Clients I'd advised for years became his first customers. Banks approved his expansion loans without a hitch. He believed it was all his own skill, and in many ways it was. But I had been smoothing the path all along. Then came Fallon. I still remember their first dinner at my apartment. She was striking. Polished, confident, radiating the kind of ease that comes from old money. Her clothes and jewelry whispered of European vacations and country clubs. She glanced around my modest space with a faint, knowing smile. During dinner, she spoke of her parents' new yacht, their vineyard plans, their trips to Tuscany. When she learned I worked as a bookkeeper, she tilted her head, voice syrupy with polite pity. "That must be challenging," she said, "making ends meet on that kind of salary." I smiled and simply answered, "It's honest work, though I just signed a consulting deal worth more in 6 months than most people earn in 2 years. After they left, her quiet assessment lingered. She had looked at my life and dismissed it as insignificant. I told myself her opinion didn't matter, but as their relationship deepened, Damon began to echo her views. He asked if I needed help with bills, suggested I move to a smaller place to save money. His concern was genuine, but it stung. My own son was starting to see me through her eyes. Their wedding was a dazzling spectacle. Flowers flown in from Holland, a string quartet that had performed for royalty. I wore a simple department store dress and sat in the third row, watching my son step into a world where my modest life barely registered. Afterward, the distance grew. Damon and Fallon settled into a grand house her parents helped them buy, filled with antiques and art worth more than everything I'd ever owned. When I visited, I felt like a guest in a museum. Fallon remained outwardly polite, but always with that subtle air of superiority. She'd ask about my cute little car, suggest shopping trips for better clothes, inquire about my job with forced interest. And slowly, almost without noticing, Damon began to adopt her perspective. Business questions that once came to me now went elsewhere. My advice, once valued, was no longer sought. Damon's calls had already grown infrequent, but after the retirement party, his voice carried a new hesitation, like he was checking on an elderly relative out of duty, not speaking to his mother. 3 years earlier, the distance between us had taken a surprising turn. One Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. "Lorna, I hope you don't mind me calling," said a tight, nervous voice. It was Margaret Wheeler, Fallon's mother. She tried to sound composed, but the story came out in fragments. Bad investments, market downturns, car dealerships bleeding cash, creditors circling. Bankruptcy was days away. They needed capital immediately, and the banks had shut their doors. "We heard you might know someone." A private lender, perhaps, Margaret said carefully. For a heartbeat, I almost laughed. Here was the same woman who'd barely hidden her condescension, now calling the poor bookkeeper for help. But beneath her words was something unmistakable. Real fear. I thought of Damon, of what it would mean for him if his wife's family lost everything. I thought of Fallon and the devastation that would follow. Maybe deep down, I hoped this might finally earn their respect. How much do you need? I asked. The number she gave me was staggering. $2 million. But I had it, quietly built over decades of careful investing. We met the next day at a downtown law office. Margaret and Richard Wheeler sat across from me, faces pale with stress. Patricia Collins, an experienced attorney, drew up the paperwork. 7 years, 5% interest, personal guarantees from both of them, and a requirement to disclose the loan to immediate family. The Wheelers refused the disclosure. They wanted Fallon to believe an anonymous investor had stepped in. Pride, I understood. We structured it as a private investment, a safety net hidden behind legal language. For a while it worked. Payments arrived on time. The dealership steadied, and Fallon never knew how close her world had come to collapse, or who had saved it. Then the payments slowed, then they stopped. Now, sitting in my living room with the documents spread across the coffee table, I saw the truth. They hadn't just borrowed money. They'd bought time, hoping for a miracle, then quietly decided to ignore the deal. Perhaps they thought the humble bookkeeper would never press them. They were about to find out otherwise. The morning after the retirement party, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of hurt and humiliation was gone, replaced by a sharp, steady purpose. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and began making calls. First to Patricia Collins, my lawyer. Patricia, it's Lorna Hastings. I need a meeting as soon as possible about the Wheeler loan and a few other matters. Her voice sharpened. Has something changed? You could say that. This afternoon, if you can. I'll make time, she promised. Next, Marcus Chen, my financial advisor of 15 years, the one person who truly knew the scope of my wealth. Marcus, I need a complete analysis of every account tied to Damon Hastings. Loans, credit lines, investments, everything. I want the full picture. A pause. Lorna, is everything okay? You sound different. Everything is about to be different. How soon can you have it? 24 hours. Finally, the hardest call of all, my son. He answered on the fourth ring, voice cautious. Mom, are you okay? How are you feeling today? I smiled to myself. Better than I have in a very long time, I said. Fallon's lips parted, but no sound came out. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. I am that businessman, I repeated, my voice calm and deliberate. The investor who saved their empire 3 years ago. Damon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to process every word. Why would they hide this from us? Because pride is a powerful thing, I said. And because they've been hoping you'd never know how close they came to losing everything. I walked to the side table and placed another folder in front of them. But that isn't the only secret you need to hear tonight. Inside was the documentation Patricia had uncovered. Late payment notices, default warnings, and the court inquiry about contesting a will. Damon scanned the pages, his hands trembling. They've been searching for ways to discredit me, I explained, my tone steady. 6 months ago, they began laying groundwork to claim I'm no longer capable of sound judgment, an attempt to void the loan entirely. Fallon covered her mouth, eyes wide. They wouldn't. They already did, I said. These are public filings. You can check the court record yourself? Damon looked up, anger flashing in his eyes. I can't believe this. Mom, I'm not telling you this for sympathy, I interrupted. I'm telling you because you need to understand the truth before more damage is done. This is no longer a private family matter. I've already scheduled a full cognitive evaluation and prepared a new will. Every step I take will be documented and legal. Fallon's gaze dropped to the floor. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought you thought I was weak, I finished gently. But don't mistake a quiet life for a powerless one. I stood and smoothed the edge of the folder. Here's what happens next. Your parents will resume payments with penalties, or my attorney will move to enforce the agreement. That's not a threat. It's business. Neither of them spoke. Damon's shoulders slumped as he absorbed the reality in front of him. I hope, I added softer now, that you both take this as a chance to see me as more than a burden or a stereotype. I'm your mother, Damon, and I'm someone who built something strong enough to protect this family, even when you didn't realize it. I walked to the door and opened it, the quiet authority in my gesture leaving no room for argument. You can stay and talk if you'd like. But the facts will not change. For a long moment they stayed seated, silent and still, the weight of the truth filling every corner of the room. Fallon sank back into the couch, her face drained of color. Damon stood motionless, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. You both need to understand, I said, voice steady. I saved your parents from losing everything. I made it possible for them to keep the life you take for granted, the house, the travel, even the luxuries you call normal. Damon dragged a hand through his hair, the same gesture he used as a boy when he was overwhelmed. I don't get it. If you had all this money, why let us worry? Why let me think you were barely scraping by? Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I own, I answered. I needed to know our relationship wasn't about my bank account. Fallon's voice cracked. And now? I held up my phone. Now I know the truth. Last night, in front of 50 witnesses, you called me bitter, useless, pathetic. I recorded everything. Their own words filled the room from the playback, each insult echoing back at them. Fallon flinched when she heard herself. Damon's face twisted in regret. Mom, we were upset. We didn't mean... You meant it, I cut in. You said exactly what you believe. And here's what you never knew. I've been supporting your lifestyle for years. Damon, 3 of your first consulting clients came from my referrals. That business loan you brag about? I quietly co-signed it through a subsidiary. Your home financing, your retirement accounts, even pieces of Fallon's jewelry collection. I had a hand in all of it. Silence. Damon's eyes widened. Fallon looked stunned. And while you were dismissing me, your parents were plotting something worse. They've stopped paying their debt, and they've been laying legal groundwork to claim I'm mentally unfit, an attempt to erase the loan entirely. I placed a final document on the table. This report comes from a private investigator. It details their conversations with you, Damon, using your worried remarks as evidence of my supposed decline. His face went pale. I never said you were incompetent. I just worried when you chose to live so simply. That concern became the foundation of their case, I replied. They were ready to use your words to strip me of everything. Fallon whispered. I didn't know. They told me you were confused, that you'd mixed up clients' funds with your own. They said they were trying to protect you. How thoughtful, I said dryly. Damon began pacing. This is unbelievable. My mother is a hidden millionaire. My in-laws are scheming to ruin her. My wife? I don't even know what to say. That's a fair summary, I said calmly. And now you both get to learn what it costs to treat someone as disposable. The room stayed silent, heavy with the weight of every revelation. I gathered the documents, my resolve unshaken. This isn't vengeance, I added, meeting their eyes. It's accountability. Your parents will repay what they owe, legally and in full. And the 2 of you will decide whether you value appearances more than truth. I moved to the door and opened it, the quiet authority in that small gesture louder than any argument. For the first time in years, I said softly, I feel perfectly at peace. Margaret's hand froze halfway to the glass, knuckles whitening. Please stop, she whispered. I didn't. April 2nd, payment to your vineyard management company, $43,000. April 9th, deposit to your personal investment account, $55,000. All while sending me nothing. Her breath hitched. The country club's soft clatter of silverware carried across the room, a sharp contrast to the quiet storm at our table. You took my money to maintain appearances, I said evenly. Trips, cars, parties. Meanwhile, you prepared to call me unstable to escape repayment. Margaret lowered her eyes. We thought we could catch up before you noticed. We meant to make it right. You meant to hide, I corrected. You even researched how to have me declared mentally incompetent. I have the court inquiry in writing. The color drained from her face. Richard thought... I'm not interested in Richard's thoughts. Here's what will happen next. I slid a final document across the table. You have 14 days to resume payments in full, including penalties and legal fees. Miss a single deadline, and my attorney will move to seize collateral and file suit for fraud. There will be no more quiet grace periods. Margaret's lips trembled. Lorna, please. This will ruin us. That's a consequence of your choices, not mine, I said, rising. You treated me like a fool. You gambled with my trust. Now you'll deal with the terms you signed. I left her staring at the untouched salad, the folder of evidence glowing like a warning flare against the white tablecloth. By mid-afternoon, every step of my plan was in motion. First National Bank, my signature removed from Damon's business credit line. Meridian Investments, my clients reclaimed, revenue streams redirected. Wheelers, served with a formal demand for payment. Each move was deliberate, each cut precise. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet accountability. Driving home in my 15-year-old Honda, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. For decades, I'd worked behind the scenes to build safety nets for everyone else. Now, at last, I was using that same skill to reclaim my own life. The empire I'd built in silence was no longer invisible, and this time, every decision, every consequence, belonged solely to me. Exactly 72 hours after I froze Damon's credit line, the scramble began. By mid-morning, my phone lit up with a string of messages. Damon, Fallon, even Richard Wheeler. Contracts were unraveling. The bank had demanded new collateral. Suppliers were pulling out. Their carefully constructed image of effortless wealth was collapsing in real time. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea, watching the city wake beneath the early light. For the first time in decades, no one expected anything from me. No hidden requests, no quiet sacrifices, only silence and freedom. By afternoon, the calls grew frantic. Damon's voice cracked with each voicemail. Mom, please, we need to talk. I didn't understand what Fallon's parents were doing. I swear I never meant to hurt you. Just call me back. Fallon tried next, her tone swinging between pleading and defiant. Lorna, this is all a mistake. We can fix it. My parents will figure something out. Please, we need you. I let the messages play out, then pressed delete, because this was never about revenge. It was about clarity. For years, I'd hidden what I built. Quiet investments, patient strategy, the empire behind the modest apartment and the 15-year-old car. I'd allowed them to believe a fiction so Damon could grow without entitlement and so Fallon's parents could save face. And they turned that grace into a weapon. Now the truth stood in the open. Every luxury they flaunted, every business deal Damon boasted about, rested on the foundation I'd built, and I no longer had to carry it. I opened the balcony door and let the evening air drift in. Somewhere across town, deals were collapsing and lawyers were drafting frantic letters. That was their work now, not mine. I raised my glass to the quiet skyline. My life, I said aloud, savoring each word, is finally mine. The phone kept ringing in the background, a thin, distant echo of the life I'd outgrown. I didn't answer. That's not true, Damon said again, but his voice lacked conviction. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. It is, Damon. You loved the version of me that fit your story, the mother you could rescue. You never cared to know the woman who rescued herself. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I spent 3 decades building something solid, quietly ensuring you had every opportunity. I wanted you to be strong enough to stand on your own. Instead, you allowed other people's fears and their greed to shape the way you saw me. His shoulders sagged. I don't know how to fix this. You don't, I said softly. That's the lesson. I don't need fixing, and I don't need saving. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tick of the clock and the distant hum of traffic outside my window. Finally, Damon whispered, I really do love you, Mom. I just didn't see who you were. I know, I replied, my voice calm but firm. And now you do. I walked to the door and opened it, the universal signal that the conversation was over. Go home, Damon. Take care of your family. Decide what kind of man you want to be. One who follows other people's schemes, or one who takes responsibility for his own life. He hesitated, eyes searching mine for a flicker of the mother who once made peanut butter sandwiches and worked double shifts to pay tuition. But that woman and the woman before him were the same. He was only just seeing the whole picture. At last he nodded, defeated, and stepped into the hallway. "Goodbye, Mom." "Goodbye, Damon," I said, closing the door with quiet finality. I stood in the stillness of my apartment, the city lights flickering through the curtains. My phone buzzed with another incoming call, Fallon this time, but I let it go to voicemail. I had nothing left to prove, no one left to appease. For years I'd hidden my strength behind modesty, letting others mistake restraint for weakness. Tonight, the truth was undeniable. I was the architect of my life, and I alone decided who had access to it. The silence felt like freedom, and it was magnificent. 6 months later, the city looked different from the top of Meridian Tower. Or maybe I did. The marble lobby gleamed beneath the soft glow of crystal chandeliers as I stepped out of the elevator, the click of my heels echoing across the polished floor. A tailored navy suit, worth more than most monthly salaries, fit me like armor. The glass doors ahead bore the new name in elegant lettering: Hastings Financial Consulting, Private Wealth Management. My name, my vision, my future. Claire, my impeccably organized assistant, greeted me with a warm smile and a tablet in hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Hastings. You have the Peterson consultation at 10, lunch with the Mayor's Economic Development Committee at noon, and your Forbes interview at 3. I returned the smile, a quiet surge of satisfaction settling over me. "Thank you, Claire. Let's have a remarkable day." From the corner office, the city stretched out in a sweep of steel and sunlight. 6 months ago, I'd been dismissed as a bitter old woman, underestimated by nearly everyone I loved. Today, I owned 3 commercial properties, managed a portfolio worth more than most regional banks, and advised clients whose names appeared on magazine covers. I thought briefly of Damon, of the grandchild I hadn't yet met. We'd spoken only twice. Short, careful calls, more truce than reunion. There was no hatred in his voice now, only a quiet respect that hadn't existed before. Time would decide what remained between us. Fallon and her parents had sold the dealerships, the yacht, the vacation homes. They'd repaid every cent, plus interest, under court supervision. Pride was expensive. I turned from the window as Claire re-entered with fresh coffee. "You're trending again," she said with a grin, setting the cup on my desk. "Forbes is calling you the most discreet power broker in the state." I allowed myself a small smile. Let them talk. Because this was the life I had built. Calm, deliberate, undeniably mine. No one was taking anything from me. No one was writing my story but me. I raised the coffee cup toward the skyline, the city alive beneath a morning sun. For the first time in decades, I wasn't hidden behind modesty or apology. I was exactly who I chose to be. Laura Hastings, wealth creator, strategist, survivor, and free. And that, at last, was more than enough. Fallon stepped carefully into the room, the baby nestled against her shoulder. Gone was the immaculate socialite. In her place stood a young mother, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but shining with something I hadn't seen before: humility. "She's beautiful," I said, my voice softer than I expected. Fallon shifted Emma gently so I could see the tiny face. A wisp of dark hair curled across the infant's forehead, her eyelids fluttering as she dreamed. "I wanted you to meet her," Fallon whispered, "and to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. For the things I said. For the things I planned. I was wrong." The words hung in the quiet penthouse like a fragile offering. "I never understood what you'd built," she continued. "I only saw what I wanted to see, someone I could look down on, someone to make myself feel important. I was cruel, and I can't undo it, but I can tell the truth now." I looked at her, at the woman who had once tried to strip me of my autonomy and now stood before me, stripped of pretense. "Does Damon know you're here?" I asked. She nodded. "He wanted to come, but I thought this needed to start with me. He's different now. We both are. We've had to learn how to live without shortcuts. We know what we lost, and we know it was our doing." Emma stirred, a tiny fist escaping the blanket. My heart tightened in a way I hadn't felt in months. "I don't expect forgiveness today," Fallon said quietly. "I just hope you might want to know your granddaughter." I reached out, hands steady despite the rush of emotion. Fallon hesitated, then carefully placed Emma in my arms. The baby's warmth seeped into me, her faint baby scent pulling memories of Damon's first days from some long, locked corner of my heart. For a long time, no one spoke. The city lights glittered beyond the glass, silent witnesses to the moment. When I finally looked up, Fallon's eyes met mine, tired, hopeful, and sincere. "This isn't an end," I said softly, rocking Emma as she sighed in her sleep. "But it's not a beginning either. It's a chance." Fallon nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, and in that quiet, holding the next generation of our complicated family, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first small step toward it, a fragile bridge built not on money or appearances, but on truth. For the first time in a long time, I let the possibility of connection back into my life as the city stretched out beneath us, full of new beginnings. I gazed down at the sleeping baby, her tiny features, a perfect blend of Damon and me. "She has his nose," I murmured, "and maybe my chin." Fallon's voice wavered. "Would you like to hold her?" My hands trembled as I took Emma, feeling the soft weight of a new life against my chest, innocent of every painful history that had led us here. "I owe you an apology," Fallon whispered. "Not just for that night at your party, for everything. For treating you like you didn't matter. For convincing Damon you were a burden. I thought wealth and status were everything. I looked down on you because I believed you had less, and I was threatened when I realized you had more. We took advantage of your kindness. We even planned to take away your independence." Tears streaked her face, but she didn't hide them. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I only wanted you to meet your granddaughter and to say I understand how wrong I was." I studied her carefully. The arrogance was gone. Humility remained. "What does Damon know about this visit?" I asked. "Nothing. He thinks you'll never forgive us. And if that's true, I'd understand. But I hope, someday, you might give us a chance to earn back your trust." "That would take time," I said quietly. "Years, maybe. And real change. Proof, not promises." "I understand." Emma stirred, a soft sound escaping her tiny lips. The hurt was still there, but love surfaced too. Love for this child who deserved more than the legacy of resentment we had created. "I'm not ready to forgive," I said at last, "but I'm willing to believe people can change." Small steps, supervised visits with Emma, family counseling with Damon, complete transparency about finances and decisions. One betrayal, and it ends permanently. "Yes," Fallon answered quickly. "Absolutely." "And Fallon," I added, meeting her eyes, "I'm not the woman who hides her success to make others comfortable. If we rebuild this family, it will be an honesty about who we really are." "I wouldn't want it any other way," she said, wiping her tears. As she turned to go, I surprised myself. "Tell Damon he can call me." Not to apologize, just to talk. About Emma, about what comes next. Her smile was radiant. "I will. Thank you." When they left, I stood alone in the quiet apartment, holding the soft pink blanket that smelled faintly of baby powder. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It held possibility. I'd learned that true freedom isn't only about breaking from those who hurt you. It's about choosing, on your own terms, who to let back in. Tomorrow, Damon would call. We'd face hard conversations about trust and rebuilding. There were no guarantees, but for the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Hope. The city lights glittered beyond the windows, and somewhere out there, my granddaughter slept, dreaming baby dreams in a world where her grandmother could finally live openly and unapologetically. That was enough. That was everything. Now it's your turn. If you were in my place, what would you do? Have you faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching until the end. On the final screen, you'll find 2 other stories from this channel, each one full of twists you won't see coming.